My name is Sabrina, and I am 22 years
Hi
old. My
guys.
parents raised my brother as a prince, me as a servant. And that sentence is not a metaphor. It was the rule of my life. From the time I was old enough to reach the sink, I was cleaning his room, folding his clothes, polishing his shoes, and standing quietly in corners while relatives praised him like he was royalty. For years, I cleaned his room, cooked his meals, and learned to disappear so completely that my own reflection felt like a stranger. They used to say it casually, almost proudly. Some children are born to serve, and every time those words left their mouths, they landed on me like a verdict I wasn't allowed to appeal. I woke before sunrise to make breakfast for everyone, iron his shirts before his interviews, and scrub floors while he slept in, dreaming big dreams that everyone encouraged except me. When I tried to speak, my mother's eyes would harden, my father's voice would cut in, and I'd be reminded of my place with a look that said silence was safer. I wasn't beaten, not in ways that left marks, but neglect can bruise deeper than fists, and favoritism can hollow a person out until they feel like furniture. Useful, unnoticed, easily replaced. For 23 years of my life, yes, 23 years, I was the shadow behind my brother's spotlight. Family photos always placed me at the edge, half-cropped, holding coats or bags. At school events, teachers praised his achievements while I was asked to help clean up after. At home, love was transactional. Do more, be quieter, expect nothing. I learned to cook not because I loved it, but because hunger wasn't tolerated when you were supposed to serve. I learned to clean because mess was blamed on me whether I made it or not. And I learned to swallow tears because crying was seen as rebellion. By the time my brother announced his wedding, I was already assigned my role without being asked. No, not bridesmaid, not family, but help. I would manage guests, fix last-minute problems, and stay invisible just like always. The wedding day arrived wrapped in silk and gold, laughter echoing through a venue I didn't belong to. I wore a plain dress chosen for practicality, not beauty, and tied my hair back the way my mother liked, neat, unobtrusive, obedient. My brother stood tall in his suit, smiling like the world had always smiled at him, while my parents glowed with pride as if they had personally crafted his success. I moved between tables, refilling glasses, adjusting centerpieces, listening to guests compliment the family. No one asked my name. No one needed to. I was doing what I had always done, serving. Then came the moment that would crack the foundation of everything I thought I knew. The bride's father, a man with sharp eyes and a calm authority, gathered everyone for a family photo. I tried to step away, instinctively shrinking back, but my mother hissed for me to stand behind them, to fill space, to make the picture look complete. As we lined up, I felt that familiar urge to fade. But when the camera lens lifted, the bride's father paused. He stared at me, not rudely, not with judgment, but with something like shock. His gaze lingered on my face, tracing features I had never considered important. The room buzzed with impatience. Someone joked about lighting, but he didn't laugh. He looked again, closer this time, like he was searching for a memory. Then he lowered the camera and asked my name. The question alone felt illegal. My parents stiffened. I answered softly, my voice nearly swallowed by the music. He nodded, eyes narrowing, and in that moment, I saw something shift. He stepped aside, pulled out his phone, and made one phone call. Just one. I didn't hear the words, but I felt the air change, like a storm forming silently. My parents whispered angrily. My brother rolled his eyes, and the bride looked confused. But the bride's father didn't explain. He just watched me, as if my face had told him a story no one else wanted to read. Standing there, surrounded by luxury that had never included me, I felt exposed and terrified. For the first time, someone had noticed something strange about my face, something familiar, something that didn't fit the story my parents had told for decades. My heart pounded as questions I had buried began clawing their way to the surface. Why had I always felt like an outsider in my own family? Why did my reflection feel borrowed? Why did serving feel like a destiny that was assigned, not chosen? I didn't know it yet, but that single glance, that single phone call, was the beginning of the end of the lie I had been living. The DNA results would change everything, but at that moment, all I knew was, that the role I had been forced to play for 23 years was about to collapse, and the truth was finally ready to step into the light. The phone call didn't stop the wedding, but it stopped my parents' control over the story. Within an hour, the bride's father pulled me aside, not to scold me, not to assign another task, but to sit me down like a human being who mattered. His voice was steady when he said my face had triggered a memory he couldn't ignore, a resemblance too exact to dismiss as coincidence. Years ago, he told me, a child had gone missing after a quiet hospital scandal that was buried with money and silence. As he spoke, my parents hovered nearby, their confidence cracking for the first time in my life. My mother's hands shook. My father avoided eye contact. And suddenly, the words they had drilled into me. Some children are born to serve sounded less like fate and more like a cover. The DNA test was done quickly, discreetly, because the bride's father had the resources and the patience to wait for truth, not excuses. When the results came back, the room went silent. I wasn't their daughter. I had never been. The truth spilled out like poison, finally uncorked. I had been switched at birth, intentionally, to protect reputations and inheritances that were never meant to include me. My parents had raised my brother as a prince because he was theirs by blood, and they had raised me as a servant because I was proof of a mistake they didn't want discovered. For 23 years, I cleaned his room, cooked his meals, and carried the weight of a lie that wasn't mine to hold. The DNA results changed everything, not just legally, but emotionally. The bride's father, my real father, looked at me with a grief so raw it hurt to witness. He apologized for every year lost, every moment I had been invisible, and in that apology, I felt something unfamiliar bloom in my chest. Worth. My parents tried to argue, to minimize, to twist the narrative like they always had. But power had shifted. Their voices sounded small now. Guests whispered. The bride stared at my brother. Realization dawning that the family she was marrying into was built on cruelty. The wedding ended early, not with applause, but with truth. I walked out of that venue not carrying trays or fixing problems, but holding documents that proved my identity and a future that finally belonged to me. The man who had made one phone call stood beside me, not as a stranger, but as family. The weeks that followed were painful and healing all at once. There were legal battles, public embarrassment, and consequences my parents had never imagined facing. My brother stopped being a prince overnight when the illusion collapsed. As for me, I had to learn how to exist without orders, without fear, without shrinking. It wasn't easy. Years of being told I was less don't disappear just because the truth comes out. But every time I looked in the mirror, I saw more than a servant. I saw a survivor. I saw the girl who endured being told she was born to serve and lived long enough to prove them wrong. Now, when I tell my story, I don't do it for revenge. I do it because somewhere out there is someone cleaning rooms they don't own, carrying shame that isn't theirs, believing lies planted by people who benefit from their silence. If my story reminds you that truth has a way of finding daylight, even through a single glance, a single phone call, then it matters. If you've ever been made to feel invisible, remember this. The DNA results changed everything for me, but courage can change everything for you too. And if stories like this give you strength, clarity, or hope, subscribe to the channel and stay with us, because sometimes the truth arrives quietly, but when it does, it changes everything.